I remember so distinctly being in my home, in my bed one day, about 2 weeks after surgery. I could hear my family playing in the living room. And I said out loud, as though there were another 10 or 15 people in that room with me, where the hell has this been my whole life? Opiates were the solution to all of it. They were the solution to the sexual abuse, to not having a really great relationship with my mom, to my dad being an alcoholic and that being confusing, to nearly dying just a few weeks before that. And so in that moment, and I share this with people that don't understand what it's like to be in an addict's brain. Like, I didn't want to be an addict. I didn't want to be an addict more than I wanted anything in this world. But in that moment was the first time in my whole life that I felt like I fit in my skin. I felt like I could finally breathe. I felt like everything was going to be okay. It was really the solution that I had been seeking from the beginning of my earliest memory.
Hello, Jennifer. It's so nice to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
So good. Thanks for having me.
Beautiful, and thank you so very much for being here. You see, I truly appreciate you. And you see, Jennifer, oftentimes I love to thank my guest for two things. And I do this so often to the point where it has become my anthem. So, firstly, Jennifer, I want to say thank you so very much for investing in yourself. You see, you are on this platform right now because you did invest that in yourself. And oftentimes, Jennifer, I love to make reference to the amazing mango tree. You see, some couple of months back, I was on a particular road, and just by the roadside, Jenny, there was this very tall, unattractive mango tree. And I use the word unattractive because the mango tree's got no mangoes on it, and the leaves were all dry. So I just walked past it and I went my way. But you see, Jennifer, just recently I was on that same road, and this time around, a lot's changed about the mango tree. You see, the mango tree caught my attention pretty good from a distance, and immediately I got the urge to move so close to it, of which I did, and it wowed me because now the mango tree's got a lot of mangoes on it, beautiful green leaves and healthy branches, and not just mangoes now, Jennifer. I'm talking about ripe mangoes. It was such a lovely experience that day, and I was so excited. Here's my point. The fact that you dedicated your time, energy, and resources to becoming the amazing Jennifer that you are today, that alone has made it impossible for me to skip you. And that's why you got the request from me to be on the show, because I was attracted to the fruit of all that you're doing, your philosophies, your insight, your journey, the impact your work is having, and how you are offering your solutions. These stuffs are beautiful. And just before I sent you that request, Jennifer, I said to myself, I've got to benefit from these beautiful things Jennifer is doing. And not only me now, because I don't want to be selfish, and even with the audience. And here we are today with the amazing Jennifer. So thank you so very much for doing that to yourself. And secondly, thank you for saying yes to the invite. Because if you had said nope, there was nothing Elisha could do about it. Thanks so much, Jennifer.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to be here for sure.
Beautiful, and thank you so very much once again. So let's get started. You see, I am quite excited to have you on the show today, Jennifer, for some reasons. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking. I believe in order for one to transition from a terrible situation to that of a beautiful one, Jennifer, I believe it takes the application of knowledge, quality information, and not just knowledge alone, but the application of it. And you see, Jenny, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking. Why? Because I do not want to remain in the dark. So that's going to make our conversation today very important to me and even to the listeners. And the second reason why I'm excited to have the incredible Jennifer on the show is for the sake of the audience. You see, Jennifer, we live in an age where Information is as abundant as grains of sand. We've got lots of information flying out there. So those folks trust me for quality, high octane, and very important information, of which I am totally convinced, Jennifer, that our conversation is going to be insightful and impactful. So, for that reason, let's get started with your introduction. Talk to us about your personal or the professional journey, because right now we are so curious. We want to know how Jennifer got here. Then, afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Jennifer, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, yeah, my journey is an interesting one. I come from a long line of addiction. So, about 4 generations that I've been able to find down my mom's side and my dad's side kind of dance, if you will, in the disease of alcoholism. I had a grandma in the 50s that was an opiate addict before that was really a thing to be. But for the most part, alcohol was incredibly normalized in my home. Unfortunately, I'm part of a statistic of that says 1 out of every 4 little girl and 1 out of every 4 little boy that's kind of raised in that dynamic are being sexually abused. And I was being sexually abused by my mom's dad. So there were a lot of things going on in my childhood. I never had a really strong relationship with my mom. If my mom spoke English, I spoke German. We never really felt the same way or communicated the same way. And so that relationship was challenging. And my father my mother wasn't my person. My dad absolutely was, right? He was my guy. I loved him. I knew he loved me. But my dad was an alcoholic. And so you never exactly knew what you were going to get when he walked in the door, whether he was going to be my guy or he was going to be inconsistent and sometimes volatile. Like you just never knew. And my sister and brother's relationship, I'm the youngest of 3. And that relationship, they really had a great connection with each other, but not as much with me. And so there was a common denominator to everything that I was going through as a child, right? With the relationship with my grandfather and my mom and my dad and my sister and brother. And that common denominator was me. Like I knew that if I could just be more lovable, if I could be less emotional, if I could be different in some way, then I could be enough. I would be enough. Like my life would be better. And so that's kind of how my childhood started. It was a wild ride for sure. Any of your listeners that have experienced sexual abuse to some degree, it's a life of trying to make sense. There's a book called Your Body Keeps Score, right? And that was true for me. Like before that little girl could articulate what she was feeling inside, she felt it, right? She couldn't say it, but she felt it. And so I think as a child, the only thing that mattered to me, I couldn't have told you if I was going to be a doctor or a mom or a wife or what, I couldn't have told you anything about me, but I could have told you I am not going to be an alcoholic. Like I'm not going to do it like these generations before me. Like I looked at their inability to sort of break the chains of this thing as just pure weakness. Like they could have if they had been courageous enough, but they weren't. And that wasn't going to be me. I was going to have a different life. My children were never going to have to experience what I experienced growing up. And that was really the whole mindset, my only goal moving forward. But in January 2003, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor and I did go into emergency surgery to remove it or I would have lost my life. And when they removed it, they caused massive nerve damage in my head, which led me to chronic pain. And that was when I was introduced to opiates. I remember so distinctly being in my home, in my bed one day, about 2 weeks after surgery. I could hear my family playing in the living room. And I said out loud, as though there were another 10 or 15 people in that room with me, where the hell has this been my whole life? Like in that moment, opiates were the solution to all of it. They were the solution to the sexual abuse, to not having a really great relationship with my mom, to my dad being an alcoholic and that being confusing, to nearly dying just a few weeks before that. And so in that moment, and I share this with people that don't understand what it's like to be in an addict's brain. Like I didn't want to be an addict. I didn't want to be an addict more than I wanted anything in this world, right? But in that moment was the first time in my whole life that I felt like I fit in my skin. I felt like I could finally breathe. I felt like everything was going to be okay. It was really the solution that I had been seeking from the beginning of my earliest memory. If you have a loved one out there that is an addict that you aren't and don't understand, it's like none of us started this to become an addict, right? No, there's not an addict in this world that started drinking or started using substance with the idea that I'm going to burn my life down. I'm going to ruin every relationship I have. I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to live in darkness every single day. Like that's never the pursuit, right? The pursuit is that I seek something that makes me feel okay. And the benefits of being an addict far outweigh the consequences for a really long time because it does that for us, right? It regulates weirdly our nervous systems in a way. It takes the fight or flight away from us. And in that moment laying in my bed, I was addicted to substance from that moment forward. Long before I was addicted to it physically, I was addicted to it sort of in that emotional capacity. So when I got sick, my kids were 2 and 5. And when my son was 17 years old, his senior year of high school, I found out that I had inadvertently, of course, become my son's drug dealer. And that my son had actually become addicted to opiates, my opiates, right? The opiates that I had been prescribed. I'm doing quotations for anybody that can't see me, right? I was prescribed everything because I had this medical condition. And so I had learned when my son was 17 years old that he had become addicted to opiates as well. And that was, I wish I could share with your audience that was the day that I said, how the heck did we get here? I'm never using substance again. I wish I could say that was it. But it wasn't. I used for several more months after that. I can say that it was the beginning to the end, right? It was the beginning of the consequences start to outweighing the benefits. Like, it was the beginning. But I used for another several months. My son graduated from high school on a Friday, and I checked myself into an inpatient facility the very next day. And that was kind of the journey to healing and, forgiving maybe more than anything, and walking in a place where my son, I could model for my son, right? He finally deserved that after all of the years of me modeling darkness and addiction and false promises and lies and all the things that happen through addiction. He finally deserved me to model for him what the light looked like, walking in the light and finding peace and serenity and doing right by him. He used for another 3 years after I got sober, and that was by far the hardest 3 years of my whole life. But that is what kind of started the process of finding some peace.
Wow, this is really interesting and amazing. And so sorry that you went through all of that. I tell you. And the fact that you are sharing these beautiful stuffs and you overcame it. And that's really interesting. And your story is really giving hope to a lot of people that might still be stuck in things like that. By getting to hear how you talked about this, they might really get some very impactful insight and something might ignite within them. I've got to change my ways, just like Jennifer did. I love the word you use, modeling light for your kid. And that's really amazing. Not just you telling him this is bad, but you're leaving it. Wow, I got that. So I've got some questions here. Are you ready for me?
Ready.
So what does you can't cure it, but you can heal really mean to you?
Yeah, I think this comes from a mindset of being a mama or a loved one of an addict. People ask me sometimes, based on my different hats that I've worn in addiction, whether it's being the child or the addict themselves or the mama of the addict, which hat has been the hardest to wear. And I would say with all certainty, without question, being a mama of an addict has been the hardest hat to wear. Partly because of what you just asked, which is I can't cure it, but how can I contribute to the solution, right? And that means I can't fix it for him. I can't go in and love him to death and remove all of the hard and just love him enough that he's going to say one day, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this anymore, right? That's not the way addiction works. That's not the way our brain as an addict works. Maybe with what I'm about ready to say, you're going to say, oh my gosh, yes, that's my addict. We learn everything the hard way. We have to experience the pain of it before we are like, oh yeah, right, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I can't cure it means I can't love this out of them. I can't fix it for them. I have to simply allow them the struggle of their own life, the discomfort of their own life, the pain of their own life. And one day, the consequences of this thing will begin to outweigh the benefits, just like it did for me, right? The problem with that as a family member is that it's not on our time frame. It doesn't happen as quickly as we want it to happen. And so that's the challenge. You just gotta build trust and rapport with them and then allow them the discomfort and pain of their lives. And that's basically what I can't cure this means.
I got it, and that's a smart one. And that's so true. Okay, so what about this one? How do people begin to heal from generational addiction and trauma?
So you can't start healing generational trauma while you're still trying to please the generation that continued the trauma. Let me just say that. It's very, very, very important. I'm going to say it again. You can't heal from generational trauma when you're still trying to please the generation that continued the trauma. Right? So there's in healing generational traumas, there's some feeling of aloneness in it, right? Important to find your people, important to find a good therapist, important to connect with people that maybe understand the shame and the experience that you've had. I know for myself, I had to start loving myself. I had to start being okay with who I was. I needed to stop looking for external validation and love from the people that I never really got it from too much growing up. And I was never going to, right? Not because they're awful humans, but because they were also incapable of giving it to me because they were also part of this generation, right? I spoke a little bit about the relationship with my mom and why it's still challenging, right? It's still a complicated relationship. But what I understand now is my mother was part of this generational trauma that my family experienced, right? She was also sexually abused by her dad. And so she was doing the best that she could with what she had been given, but yet it was deficient. It wasn't enough for what I needed to heal from this. And so I can't look at her to get me out of this sort of generational trauma because she's not ready to get out of it herself, right? And so that's the interesting thing about healing generational trauma is you got to go find your people. You got to go find people that you connect with outside of that family unit so that you can start healing.
You got to go find your people. I got that. And that was a fantastic response. Okay, let us look at your solution, your approach. How do you help people move from guilt and control to self-trust and peace?
This is hard. And if this were easy, I wouldn't have any clients. This is really when I work with the family members of addicts, right? Those people that are like the moms and the dads and the sisters and the brothers of the person struggling with addiction. And oftentimes when they come to me, they are ridden with shame or ridden with guilt. And they don't know how to walk through that and find peace. There are a lot of sort of real-time things that you can start doing that helps. But I think if you were to ask me one right off the bat, I think faith and fear cannot coexist at the same time. They just can't, right? They can be minutes apart from one another, but they do not live simultaneously together at the same time. And I don't know how you feel, but I feel like my higher power does not want me living in fear. And fear is what moves me towards guilt and shame and some of those darker feelings that you're talking about. And so in order to delineate between faith and fear, I've got to start recognizing and like get it out of the subconscious. What is my biggest fear? What is my worst case scenario? What am I afraid of? And then at that point, I can start in real time sort of being able to catch that when I'm feeling that and realizing, oh, I got to switch this to faith, right? I got to switch this to a surrender, to a peace, rather than living in this place of fear.
I got that. Switching from a place of fear to faith. I got that. So finally, okay, um, let's talk about self-compassion. All right. So what role does self-compassion play in recovery?
I mean, so important, both from recovering from an addiction myself, but also coming from a place of contributing to the solution of a loved one's addiction rather than contributing to the problem. I have a saying, and I'm a quote girl. This quote, I think, as far as I'm aware, comes from me. So I don't know. I don't know if anybody else says it, but what I say all the time is that perfection is not required. Perfection is not required, right? I think so many of us, especially when we come from addiction or even, a broken sort of dynamic in our family, we think if we're perfect, this is all gonna work out. Like if I could be a perfect mom, then my son wouldn't struggle with addiction. If I could be a perfect wife, then right. And the fact is, we are human beings. We are not perfect, and we will never achieve perfection. And so when I started giving other people some grace of being just short of perfect themselves, I started to allow myself, right, that me not being perfect was okay. And that is when self-compassion started seeping into my life. I had told myself a narrative for a really long time that I wasn't lovable unless I was perfect, right? I wasn't worthy unless I was perfect. And so when I started to allow myself to be just short of perfect, that is when the self-compassion started playing in my life. And this is the thing. I don't think, this is just my personal opinion, there's maybe people out there that feel differently. I don't think I could obtain recovery or sort of a transcended life without first starting to move into the idea that I have some compassion for myself. And that's hard, especially when you've experienced trauma, right? I had to do a lot of, I spoke earlier, like I had to forgive my grandfather, who I'm not going to break bread with him. I'm not going to sit, he's been gone for decades, but if he were here today, I'm not going to sit down and have dinner with him, right? But I forgave him in the sense that I released his energy. I released his darkness out of my body. And again, that's when I started to be able to find self-compassion and love for myself.
That shows the power of forgiveness. I got that as well. And I'm going to take that as a final thought, Jennifer. So, for folks who like to reach out to you, learn more about the wonderful stuff you're doing, or even ask you questions, how can that be possible?
Yes. So, my website is www.rise, RISE, Addiction LC. It stands for life coaching, riseaddictionlc.com. And there it shares all of the different services I do, but even maybe more importantly, there's a contact me button. I'd love to hear from your listeners. Just email me and let me know how you're doing and how maybe addiction has impacted your life, and just to connect. I think connection is so important, especially when we're talking about healing from addiction.
Very, very important, and I got that. So that's going to be the end of the show, Jennifer. Thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing this wonderful stuff with us. It means a whole lot. Thank you.
Have the best day.